The post-game show, Friday afternoon. We are 3 hours until 6 o'clock. 3 hours to the weekend. 5 o'clock for those who are, working 9 to 5. So it's, 2 hours until then. The weekend is here. We can all smell it. We can feel it. Good to be with you again. I was with you guys this morning, 6 to 9 with Preston Thorne. Had a fun time with that group and excited to be here to take you up until 6 o'clock. Got a lot to talk about today, man. Obviously, the Gamecock baseball series, even though it's against Missouri, who's not a good baseball team, there's still some stuff to look for, and there's still a reason to be invested into that series because there's going to be some postseason implications. Whether we know it right now or not, there's going to be a little bit of implication there. There's a big sports night last night in the NBA and the NHL, and for those who are watching on the stream, obviously you can hear us 107.5 The Game in Columbia, 100.5 in Florence, 100.3 in Myrtle Beach. You can watch us on the Game TV on YouTube at the Game TV Radio, and as always, sponsored by Shepherd's Glass. And if you are watching us through that medium, you'll notice that I'm wearing a jersey. I'm not a big jersey wearer, but I'll do it for occasions. I've had to break this one out of the closet. I'm wearing my Ryan Johansson Nashville Predators jersey because the Nashville Predators are playing a big Game 6 tonight. If you need something to watch on TV and South Carolina's taking care of Missouri, ruling them maybe, it's not out of the realm of possibility because the Gamecocks have done that in their last two games. Missouri, Max Scherzer ain't walking through that door, I promise you. It's not a great pitching staff, so it's possible. So when that might happen, and you need an extra viewing opportunity, I highly suggest flipping over to watch the Predators take on the Canucks in Game 6, trying to push it to Game 7 now. Not many teams pull off the 3-1 series comeback, but after they stole another game in Vancouver, I think they can get one tonight. They've lost the first two in Nashville. You can't lose all three, right? So I got to break out the jersey. And also, if I didn't break out the jersey and they lose tonight, then I would have no chance to break out the lucky jersey. So if you're watching on the video stream, I am indeed rocking my old school number 92 Ryan Johansson Nashville Predators jersey. And one thing to look forward to in this show, and we're going to do this in the last segment, because we've had a lot of fun with the real NBA player or fake NBA player game that I'd play with Jay. Our fearless captain, Captain David Dare, behind the glass, will play a different rendition of this game. It's not going to be an NBA player. But I have 5 games, 5 sporting events, high school games across the country, whether it be baseball, whether it be softball, even soccer. There are 5 games across the country against high schools. And Dave's going to tell me if they're real or not. And trust me, it sounds easy in theory, potentially. But there's some wild ones out there, man. There's some wild ones. So I'm really excited to break that out. I know Dave's really pumped. We're going to debut that here later on in the show. Very, very excited about that. And Dave's going to have a good time because Dave is a good sport. Captain David Dare is a good sport about a lot of things. Whether he wants to admit it or not, you're a good sport, Dave. But last night, we had a display of what being a bad sport looks like. And that's where I want to start this show with, right? Because it's really made its rounds on social media really quickly. And you caught a little bit of it last night towards the end of the game. And this happened in the Milwaukee Bucks-Indiana Pacers game. The Pacers eliminated the Milwaukee Bucks, ended their season in rather humiliating fashion. The Pacers didn't even have great games from their star players like Tyrese Halliburton and Pascal Siakam, but they crushed the Milwaukee Bucks in bench points. Really embarrassed them. It was kind of a close-ish game for a half. Second half rolls around, and you could tell the Bucks really missed Giannis Antetokounmpo. Real basketball player. A real good basketball player. Didn't play at all in the series due to injury. The Indiana Pacers completely wiped the floor with the Bucks in the second half, and it kind of got ugly when Patrick Beverley is sitting on the bench, and he takes a basketball and throws it at a fan behind him, and it hits this young woman in the head, and you think, oh, that's bad enough. That's a bad look. A one-way ticket to Bad Look City. It got worse. He called for the ball back. Right? Like he made a bad pass. Like, oh, I'm trying to throw it to somebody else. Here, give me the ball back. So a gentleman in the rope ahead of the woman who just got hit in the face with this basketball takes the basketball back and gives it back to Patrick Beverley, who then takes it, rears it back, and throws it even harder and hits another woman. And at that point, a couple gentlemen stand up and are like, what's going on? And then, of course, there's a little bit of, I don't even want to say it's a skirmish because no one put hands on anybody. But Patrick Beverley was yelling at fans. Those fans were yelling at Patrick Beverley. And you went from, the loss being the storyline to Patrick Beverley showing his rear on national television and just chucking basketballs at pedestrians. Right? It's a terrible look. This alone is really bad. And this is where we're going to get to right now. Captain Dave, if you don't mind, the cut that I sent you, it's not numbered, but it's the one that I dropped in the Google Drive. It's a late addition to our cut list. This is Charles Barkley's thoughts on what happened with Patrick Beverley and the fans sitting behind the bench.
Meantime, we've talked about Pat Beverley in the course of this series, and you even said, love watching Pat Beverley play.
Yes.
Because he brings energy, brings an edge to the floor.
He's tough.
If he doesn't cross the line. But tonight, it appears, we don't know the circumstances, but it certainly appears he crossed the line.
Oh, he hit that lady in the head.
Throws a ball in the stands.
He hit that lady
back, and he fires it back.
Oh, he gone. He gonna get suspended.
Yeah,
Man, he hit that lady in the head.
That'll be next.
Obviously, he was trying to hit that guy. It don't matter who he was trying to hit.
Yeah.
You can't hit no lady ever. Yeah. And then
you can't throw a ball at a fan.
I understand that, but listen, I've done stupid stuff, and and I got criticized. That's just wrong. He gonna get suspended for that, and that's gonna be a good one too, because he didn't do it once, he did it twice.
Yeah, no doubt. Don't expect that from a 35-year-old, 12-year veteran.
I don't expect that from an 18-year-old. That's just stupid.
It is stupid. It was really stupid. And what's hilarious, which they gave Patrick Beverley a lot of credit for saying they like the edge he brings to the court. And really the only edge that he's brought to the court is hitting the edge of the rim on jumpers and losing a couple steps defensively. The Patrick Beverley that was an all-defensive player a few, 4 or 5 years ago. Use the Rick Pitino quote all the time, but that sure ain't walking through that door anytime soon. But Patrick Beverley had a nice display on how not to treat people in that scenario right there. And it got worse. Or at least for him, it got worse. Because in the postgame press availability, he didn't go to the podium because usually the guys who go to the podium are the ones who contribute in the basketball game. Patrick Beverley was sitting at his locker, and there was a scrum of reporters around him. And ESPN's Melinda Adams, who is a producer, was just gathering sound, asking questions, gathering sound. And she asked him a question. And he said, you can't, basically, paraphrasing here, you're not allowed to ask me a question if you don't subscribe to my podcast. Which coming out of my mouth sounds really stupid. I'm somebody who has done a lot of podcasts, has shamelessly promoted it across a multitude of platforms. Even that sounds ridiculous coming out of my mouth. But he would not let Melinda Adams ask him a question because she's not subscribed to his podcast. And while he's taking questions elsewhere, Melinda Adams, doing her job, still has the microphone next to Patrick Beverley, getting audio, which, again, is her job. Patrick Beverley's job also, before we jump down my throat saying he doesn't have to talk to anybody. He doesn't have to talk to anybody. But he is contractually obligated to sit there and let people get the sounds, even if it's of his silence, because they're doing their job. They are media partners. That's how partnerships work. And he takes her microphone and shoves it away and says, can you move out of the scrum, please? Can you please get out of the circle? Because she's not subscribed to his podcast. It is laughably self-sabotaging. And I think this should go to show that, not all publicity is good publicity. I think that phrase gets thrown around so many times that all publicity is good publicity because people are talking about you, because somebody like me in Columbia, South Carolina is talking about Patrick Beverley. It's not a good thing, buddy. It's not. And look, because who sees what he's doing right now, especially when he's trying to promote a podcast and say, you know what, this is a real stand-up guy. This guy just chucked basketballs at fans behind the bench. He just kicked this poor reporter who's doing her job, just getting sound and audio out of a reporter's or out of the scrum because she's not subscribed to his podcast, who sees that and says, wow, this is a fascinating individual. This is somebody I am dying to hear. I'm going to go look at your podcast now because I'm so intrigued by how you treated somebody. It's terrible. It's terrible. And there's a reason that this guy's on team number 7 in 14 years, right? He stayed 5 years in Houston, and that's his longest stay. But this guy has basically been for rent, like a Blockbuster video, in the NBA for the last, 8, 9 years. 7 teams in 14 years. The shtick is annoying. It's become a headache. And while I do understand that role players win championships, trust me, I would love to one day sit down and do a study on the teams that have won NBA titles over the last 2 decades and looked at the players on there and take, like win shares, value over replacement players, some of the advanced stuff of just the role players and getting an average and saying, okay, universally across the board, your role players need to have an average of this. We'll do that one day. So you got to have good role players to win titles because I can go through every team that's won a championship the last 2 decades and at least been able to point at certain players that made plays. People still sometimes talk about J.J. Barea D'ing up LeBron James in 2011. That's the only thing anybody ever talks about when it comes to J.J. Barea is his defense against LeBron in 2011. Shoot, Alex Caruso is still making a living on the defense he played in the bubble finals in 2020. But even though Patrick Beverley at one point in time in his career was a valuable role player that could help you win a title, he was at one point, it's not worth putting up with petulant behavior and being an absolute headache and trying to be a villain that, while it might seem authentic, it does seem authentic that he wants to be this character, wants to be this villain. No one's going to want to put up with it, man. Because if you were that good of a role player, you probably wouldn't be on 7 teams in 14 years. If it was worth keeping you around, you probably wouldn't be shipped off so many times like he has. At some point, the shtick does outweigh the productivity. And for somebody who hasn't averaged over 10 points a game in a long time, I think the shtick is outweighing the productivity. Today, Patrick Beverley is probably the most hateable character in the NBA. And that leads me to the poll question for today. Because Preston and I were talking on the show this morning about, South Carolina football villains, right? Do they have coaching villains in the SEC? Like, obviously, Dabo Swinney's the free space on the bingo card. But do you have somebody in the SEC that you play year in, year out, that you just can't stand? You want to beat them really bad. And it's not just because they beat you, but you want to beat them really bad because their coach or a player has some type of villainous quality. So today we asked at 1075 The Game on Twitter. You got 20 hours left in this poll, plenty of time to vote. Who would you vote as the most hateable opposing SEC head coach on the Gamecocks' upcoming schedule? It would be easy to put, Kirby Smart, Josh Heupel, Billy Napier on there, but they're not going to see them for 2 years. So we'll put them on the back burner here. Just the coaches we're going to see next year. Eli Drinkwitz, Lane Kiffin, Mark Stoops, Brian Kelly. So far, with 120 votes, Eli Drinkwitz has 52.5% of them. He's got a lot of them. Overwhelming over Lane Kiffin, who I kind of hypothesized might be. He's at 23.3%. Mark Stoops is only at 13.3%, and Brian Kelly's at 10.8%. So an overwhelming majority of the Gamecock fans in this poll find Eli Drinkwitz as the most hateable, and we'll keep this updating as the show goes on. But have you ever made a mistake financially? Like a really bad mistake financially, an immature, bad mistake with your money and made a bad investment? I have, and I want to share that, but it's going to pale in comparison to a bad investment that a professional sports team made that absolutely ended up with egg on their face in one of last night's games. I'll tell you what that is as the postgame show rolls on. I think one thing that's really relatable, despite, different sports fandoms and our differences normally, is that every now and then we make bad decisions. We make bad financial decisions. And in the spring of 2010, I made a really dumb one. If anybody remembers power balance bracelets, like if you search power balance bracelet on Google right now, the first thing that's going to come up is power balance bracelet scam, right? Because it's this bracelet that had like this little like metal medallion looking thing at the center, and it was supposed to improve your balance, and it was supposed to, improve your stamina. And I, as a sophomore in high school, bought hook, line, and sinker, thought it looked really cool. I saw NBA players wearing it, and I'm like, well, if it's good enough for them, that's going to be good enough for me. I got to be able to wear that, right? It's going to look cool, and it might help me, on the basketball court. That's a great idea. Without doing any research or anything like that, I purchased one, and now you can, if you Google it, you can find them on Etsy for like $9.99. And there's some originals that are still online for about $23.99. It's all under $30. But, buddy, in their prime, these suckers were easily selling for over $40, $50 sometimes. Way too expensive. And for somebody who didn't have a full-time job being a sophomore in high school, who was playing basketball all the time and, being a student, and the only money that I was making was, refereeing Pee Wee football games on Saturday mornings in the fall before basketball season started. That was the only money I was making. So I didn't have a lot to spend, but it was enough for me to be irresponsible with. It was a stupid investment, a terrible investment. I didn't have that thing for very long, and I remember I ended up tearing up in a basketball practice. So I was young, dumb, and made some bad decisions over various degrees, but this was one of my more memorable ones in terms of just ones that I can think of off the top of my head. But no matter how bad I might feel about certain financial investments or getting duped about something, like spending money that I shouldn't be spending and getting completely duped on it, I will never feel as bad as Daryl Morey and the Philadelphia 76ers for signing Tobias Harris for a 5-year, $180 million contract, only for him to score 2 points. Nope. Scrap that. 2 points, no. Shoot 2 shots. Didn't even score. 0 points. To score 0 points on 2 shot attempts in a win-or-go-home game against the New York Knicks. I'll say it again. 5 years, $180 million. Now, the average, I think, is close to like 35 a year, but this season, his cap hit was over $39 million. Almost 40. They were almost paid this man $40 million, and in the biggest game of the season, the game that you need to win at home, to be able to force a Game 7 and really put all the pressure in the world on the New York Knicks. For those who missed it, the New York Knicks, 118, Philadelphia 76ers, 115. They ended their season after the Sixers miraculously pulled one out of their rear in the final 35 seconds at Madison Square Garden in Game 5 with some, Tyrese Maxey heroics. The Sixers really needed the help of a third player. Joel Embiid played well for the most part in the series, but he wasn't 100%. He was battling some Bell's palsy, and he still has a knee thing that's going on. Tyrese Maxey was playing about as well as he has ever played. The NBA's most improved player, played like the NBA's most improved player because he looked like a superstar. But you don't pay Tyrese Maxey to have to score over 30 points a game in the playoffs. You do, however, spend a lot of money on Tobias Harris to give you something. And it wouldn't be so bad if he wasn't so bad the entire series. Because it could be easy to be like, well, Elijah, he had a bad game. Okay, well, he only scored 9 points per game in the entire series. The guy's a career 16-point-per-game player pretty consistently throughout his career. Maybe some years he was closer to 20. But for the most part, he's hovered around 16 points a game for his career. And I don't even like using points-per-game averages to dictate player worth, but he is a solid, above-average three-point shooter, and has had some years where he has broken into the 40% range for three-point shooting. There's an upside, and he's always been regarded as a solid defensive player. It's not just the points, right? It's not just the scoring. This basketball is more than that. And I don't want to be that guy to limit a complex sport into something that's just one element. An important element, but not just that one element. But last night, to score 0 points is one thing. To average 9 points per game when you're making $39 million a year in a playoff series in which your team really needs your help is another. And then to do so on 8.5 shots a game? 8.5? The Sixers don't have a lot of other scoring options. Shoot, Buddy Hield played for the first time in like 3 games last night and scored 17 points in the second quarter. 17. They had to literally bring him off the bench and dust him off because he was just collecting dust at the end of the Sixers bench, a guy they traded for to do nothing but shoot threes. Buddy Hield wasn't scared to let it fly. And he actually shot them back into the game. You know, they were down 20 in the first half. The Knicks got whatever they wanted. But the Sixers were able to come back because Buddy Hield was able to make a ton of shots, score 17 second-half points, end up with 20 on the night. Got cold in the second half. But you still needed something from Tobias Harris because, again, you are paying him $180 million over 5 years. And in a crucial Game 6, to send this thing back to New York, to be able to put all the pressure in the world on the Knicks, who would be just then 4 quarters away from gagging away a 3-1 series lead, which, you know, if you've kept up with the New York Knicks in the last 2 decades, that would be the most Knick thing to ever happen, is to blow a 3-1 series lead when it felt like you were in control for a lot of it. That would not be that surprising. You got to get yourself in that position. But one of the reasons they were not in that position is because of Tobias Harris. Sometimes I like to pile on players. I feel like this one's very deserved. And I like Tobias Harris. He was a really good player at Tennessee. A one-and-done under Bruce Pearl on the last Bruce Pearl team. The guy, like I said, has carved out a good career for himself. And it's not his fault that he's getting paid this much money. It is his fault that he shot only twice in this game, in a do-or-die game. It is his fault he only took 2 shots and didn't score. Scoring 0 points is one thing, because if you're getting open shots and it's just not falling, like, dude, that's basketball sometimes. But to only shoot twice is abysmal. And the Philadelphia 76ers are going to look back on that as one of the worst contracts they have signed in their franchise's history. This is one of the worst contracts outside of maybe the one that Russell Westbrook had before he renegotiated. Now he's only making about $4 million a year with the Clippers, with similar results, actually. But this is going to go down as one of the worst valued contracts in pro sports right now. And Daryl Morey's got to be kicking himself. That Sixers front office has got to be kicking themselves, and they cannot get this thing to expire enough. Smart teams don't just have good coaches and good players, they have good general managers. They have guys that can team build and understand value in players. Daryl Morey has done a lot for the game in terms of changing the aesthetic of it during his time in Houston. He is widely renowned as one of the smarter mathematical minds in pro sports. The three-point revolution obviously started by Steph Curry to a degree, but his Houston Rockets team took it to a whole new level and became the first team to ever shoot more threes than 2s in a season. He's done a lot of good stuff in his career. But Hall of Fame bad is a commitment to Tobias Harris that is worth $180 million, $39 million in the cap. And for comparison, Jalen Brunson, the hero for the Knicks last night, who scored 41 points and dropped 12 assists. Former 2-time National Player of the Year at Villanova, who was drafted in the second round and started his career at Dallas. He has a cap hit of only $25 million this year. One player is getting paid $25 million, put up 41 and 12. One player is the second highest player on his team, with the first highest payer being a former NBA MVP, making $14 million more and having a difference of 41 points between the two. So we've all made bad investments. I've had my fair share, and I'm going to continue to make more, especially when the college football video game comes out here very soon that EA Sports is making. I'm going to get irresponsible, and I'm going to buy a PS5, and I'm going to play an irresponsible amount of NCAA football. And ultimately, that might end up being a bad decision, but no one can stop me. I really want to do it. But it will never be as bad a decision as the investment the Philadelphia 76ers made on Tobias Harris. The Sixers aren't the only stupid franchise right now, because there are a couple of others that have been bounced from the NBA playoffs, and it's not just an NBA thing. We can make this an NFL thing, an NHL thing, MLB thing, insert pro sports thing here. because the NBA playoffs are proving to show a pattern in bad GMing that could be a sign for other GMs across all other sports. I'll tell you what that is as the postgame show rolls on. A lot of talk about the basketball playoffs tonight, but I've got a little bit of action here on the hockey playoffs, and I'm getting very invested with help from my friends at Prize Picks. It's America's #1 fantasy sports app. It is my favorite fantasy sports app, and you can win up to 10 times your money, 100 times your money even, on picking more or less on just 2 to 6 player stat projections. And watch the winnings roll in. Tonight in the hockey playoffs, I've got the more option on UC Saros saves at 23.5. Nashville Predators goalie. You know, I'm going to put a little skin in the game here. He's one of the best goalies in the NHL. I'm going to ride that high. I also got Wyatt Johnston, a forward from Dallas Stars, getting more than 3.5 shots on goal. He has been on fire. You can come with me and maybe win some money of your own. Download the app today. Use promo code 1075game for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code 1075game on Prize Picks for a deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Go to 1075thegame.com and register for the Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union Grand Slam giveaway, because every game, $25 gets added to the pot. And if a Gamecocks hitter rips a Grand Slam home run, you, if you enter, can win all the cash in the pot. And right now, that bad boy is at $1,100. It's a pretty hefty win if we do end up getting a Grand Slam tonight against Missouri. Not high on Missouri and their pitching staff. Don't expect much of it. So I think there's a good chance. Preston made a good point today, too, though, that there is a possibility that if you're just red hot, right, and you're just pounding hit after hit after hit, maybe there's not an opportunity for the bases to get loaded because everyone's being brought in home already. That's a good point, but I would like to see it this weekend. Somebody win this money. Somebody's got to win it because, I mean, this thing's getting up pretty good. You can buy a lot of stuff with $1,100. Again, that is the Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union Grand Slam giveaway. Mentioned before the break that the NBA might be setting, in terms of how their playoffs have gone, setting some precedent in terms of cautionary lessons for other teams that are in win-now windows, but think just buying a ton of superstars and trying to abuse the salary cap is the way to successfully win in those leagues. The NBA right now is the poster boy of it. Because you look at a few of the teams that are eliminated, including one team that's still in. I'm going to include the Los Angeles Clippers. They're not eliminated yet. Even if they pull off a comeback and win this series in 7 games, they're down 3-2 right now, but even if they make a miraculous comeback and win this series, there's no way they're making the Western Conference Finals. There's none. I'm willing to mark the tape and put my name on that. They're not making the Western Conference Finals. But they've all had very similar strategies, like the Lakers, the Suns, very similar strategies. And today, the firing of Darvin Ham, which happened about an hour ago, the Lakers head coach of 2 years, could be, a sign that the self-awareness in these organizations also isn't very strong. We'll start off with the Phoenix Suns, though, because they're the most hilarious example of this right now. Bill Simmons called it new owner syndrome whenever Matt Ishbia bought the Phoenix Suns and ended up just throwing gobs of money at the roster, trying to acquire, massive superstar, big-name talent. Because remember, when he bought the Phoenix Suns, they were in the NBA Finals just the year before. And they had a really good core of players. You had an aging Chris Paul, but a Chris Paul that was helping you win basketball games and was still being able to be productive enough to necessitate paying him the amount of money you were paying him. He fit in perfectly. Didn't need to take a ton of shots, but he could run the offense, get you everything that you needed. You had Devin Booker, who you knew you were going to have to pay eventually, and that was going to be a pretty big price tag, but you're not afraid of that because that's a guy you drafted. You're able to maybe get a possible hometown discount to keep him around, and he's a lights-out scorer, elite mid-range shooter, a really good three-point shooter, and is able to get his off the bounce, and a solid, serviceable defender. I'd say serviceable defender. And then you had players like Cam Johnson, Mikal Bridges, who are really good role players. I mean, really good role players. And then you had DeAndre Ayton, who, hilariously enough, was the first overall pick in a draft that included Luka Doncic just a few picks after. But he was serviceable, right? A decent big man that you were paying on a rookie contract before you had to ship him out of town. You traded a lot of those players for Kevin Durant. A Kevin Durant that, while still putting up decent numbers in Brooklyn, was still coming off that Achilles tear, was not assimilating really well with his superstar team, because remember, he was playing with Kyrie Irving and James Harden. But he's Kevin Durant, right? He's Kevin Durant. So Matt Ishbia gave away a ton of draft capital and a ton of the players, or at least he made James Jones, the GM of the Suns, get rid of a lot of these good young players that are role players and acquire Kevin Durant, which comes with a really big price tag. A price tag, mind you, that's over $50 million per season. And then this past summer, they traded almost what was left of their draft capital and some other role players for Bradley Beal, an aging star, guy who's been in the league for over a decade. And I'm going to use the word star lightly, right? He put up really good numbers on relatively decent efficiency for bad Washington Wizards teams. They traded for him, got rid of a lot of future assets with the hopes that they have a big three. We have stars. We have Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal. This is the best 2K team ever. Stars. Well, those 3 players account for a hilarious number of 106% of their salary cap. Wait, Elijah, 106%? How do you account for over 100% of a team's salary cap? Well, I'll tell you why. When you're paying over $103 million over that cap and you break the cap, where your next highest paid players are Yusuf Nurkic and Grayson Allen at under $18 million a year, that is how. Because unfortunately, you can't field a team with just 3 players. You got to be able to pay other guys to, fill out a roster with live bodies that aren't going to play for free. And of course, in the NBA, you will absolutely get luxury tax to hell if you end up breaking the salary cap like that. The Phoenix Suns did so in a gross, disgusting manner, and they're getting, luxury tax to hell right now. And Matt Ishbia said, I don't care. I want stars. Well, they struggled to stay on the floor all season long. Bradley Beal played maybe half the season, and you were only good enough to be the 6th seed in what was, I'll concede, a really good Western Conference. You got to be a good team to be the 6th seed in the Western Conference in the regular season. But the Minnesota Timberwolves brought out the brooms, and they swept them off the floor and humiliated them in their own building in Game 4. Mostly from Anthony Edwards, who was a first number 1 overall pick from the Minnesota Timberwolves. Jaden McDaniels shut down Kevin Durant, a draft pick, a lottery pick. They signed veteran Mike Conley, but not to the massive contract that he had in Memphis, which at one point in time, many moons ago, was the most lucrative contract in NBA history. That expired. They got him on a cheaper deal. And they traded for Rudy Gobert, who is in his prime still and is arguably one of the best defensive big men the NBA has seen since Ben Wallace and Dwight Howard, when Dwight Howard was in his prime. And they swept you, just completely waxed you right off the floor. The Los Angeles Lakers, 67% of their salary cap used by 2 players, Anthony Davis, LeBron James. And they don't call Anthony Davis day-to-day Davis for nothing, because he misses a lot of time. He played over 70 games this year, however, for the first time in his career, and he got drafted in 2012. This is the first time he's played over 70 games in his career. LeBron is turning 40 in December. He's played 20-plus years in the NBA. There's not a ton of mileage left. I know he's a machine, and I know he blows minds with how durable he's been for over 20-plus years and being able to play at this high a level, because he still had a really good high-level playing season this season. But 67% of the salary cap went to those 2 players, and they traded away players like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and Alex Caruso, who were the 2 best perimeter defenders you had on the championship team in 2020. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, also a really good spot-up 3-point shooter. That's how you end up going from the team that was the number 1 seed in the West when you went on your run in the bubble and won an NBA championship to now being average, above average in the Western Conference. You trade away really good role players because you want stars. They traded away KCP for Russell Westbrook. He was part of the Russell Westbrook trade. Russell Westbrook didn't make 2 full seasons in a Laker uniform. But Darvin Ham, who's been coaching there for 2 years, who did not make that trade, did not have anything to do with that deal, is the one that suffered the consequences, right? He suffered the consequences for it because he got fired about an hour ago. And the Clippers, like I said, they're $103 million over the cap. The same as the Phoenix Suns. They're as over the cap and as luxury taxed because Steve Ballmer also had that new owner syndrome and said, we're going to give away every single draft pick to acquire Paul George. We're going to sign Kawhi Leonard. Well, that trade where they got rid of Paul George, the draft picks they gave to the Oklahoma City Thunder turned into Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Jalen Williams, Trey Mann, and a pick that eventually ended up being Jaime Jaquez, who will be a first-team all-rookie player this season in the NBA. All those players to the Thunder, and they were the number 1 seed in the Western Conference, and they are legit title contenders this year, all from those picks. It's a bad trend in pro sports, and we'll continue this discussion as hour number 1 of the postgame show wraps up. Coming up in the next hour, we're going to talk a lot about this baseball series against Missouri. And mostly in terms of what's on the line and maybe what can possibly go wrong. Because I know I've probably done like the worst radio broadcaster jinx here in the last week because I haven't necessarily been the best PR representative for Missouri baseball. Haven't quite talked them up yet because they, quite frankly, aren't that good of a baseball team. But nothing's an easy win in college baseball. Nothing is going to come easily, and things can go wrong. Murphy's Law is a law made for something like baseball, right? A lot can go wrong, and as much as South Carolina has the edge in hitting, pitching, coaching, you name it, they have the edge everywhere. Fielding, there are some things that can go wrong, and I'll tell you what might be able to go wrong, and that if these things happen, it might spell trouble for South Carolina. That's all coming up in hour number 2. And you can hear the game tonight, 6:45 pregame. Derek Scott, Stuart Lake on the call with a 7 o'clock first pitch. And all of this, too, side note, is going to be weather permitting, right? Because I've checked the radar, and it's not great. There is some chance of some rain tomorrow. So these times are official as of now. We'll play it by ear, because sometimes the weather doesn't cooperate. But 3:45 scheduled pregame for tomorrow with a 4 o'clock scheduled first pitch. And then on Sunday, they're wrapping it all up with a 1:45 pregame and a 2 o'clock first pitch. I'm talking about in the last segment, maybe some lessons that other pro sports teams, and this isn't just isolated for the NBA, right? Like this could be a lesson for Major League Baseball teams. And teams like the Yankees have fallen victim to this all the time. The Pittsburgh Pirates, which is really funny, and it's one of the worst trades in Major League Baseball, where a few years ago, if you don't recall, the Tampa Bay Rays were not necessarily in win now mode. I can't remember. I think this might have been 2017. The Rays weren't going to be making the playoffs. The Pirates were making a push. All right, they're still like plateauing from Andrew McCutchen's big MVP season, which was in the recent past at this point in time, and they still had a team that could contend. I want to say, 2 or 3 years before, they, beat my Cincinnati Reds in the wild card game to be able to get into the NLDS, and they were still a team that had a window. It wasn't much of a window, but there was a window, and they traded 2 of their top minor league prospects, Austin Meadows and Tyler Glasnow, in exchange for Chris Archer. Chris Archer used to be an all-star in Tampa Bay, but the minute he got traded to Pittsburgh, that stock tanked bad. He was supposed to be the big arm to help get the Pirates over the hump. Didn't happen. Failed in comedic fashion, and Austin Meadows ended up being a starting center fielder for the Tampa Bay Rays a year or 2 after. Tyler Glasnow ended up being one of the better pitchers in baseball for a few years before his Tommy John surgery and is now making a reemergence with the Los Angeles Dodgers right now. What the Pirates did was mortgage important future assets for something they deemed as being in win-now mode. It's such a risky strategy. And we can pull all types of examples, too, especially in the NFL. I mean, Les Snead, the GM of the Los Angeles Rams, famously wore a shirt that said, "Bleep them picks," because he mortgaged their entire future for bringing in Matthew Stafford. We'd be having a very similar conversation about them if Stafford was never healthy, never available, and they never won that Super Bowl. But they won it in that 1-year window, and ever since, they have not been considered contenders. And a lot of that has to do with Matthew Stafford's age, some natural regression, and the fact that he hasn't been able to stay healthy for full years. So while it's pretty convenient, for me to be, play, I guess, armchair GM and say, don't ever mortgage the future for that, I think more often than not, we are finding out that teams that at least keep draft capital or at least invest in their young players and play it smart with the salary cap and don't handcuff themselves, oftentimes are having a higher chance of being able to contend down the road. The Oklahoma City Thunder right now, I alluded to the Paul George trade in the last segment. The Clippers wanted another star to pair with Kawhi Leonard so bad that they were able to part with just a ton of draft capital, and that capital not just turned into good role players. Like Jalen Williams, I don't even consider a role player right now. Jalen Williams is a legitimate starter and a legitimate player who could one day be an all-star. He's a legit number 3 option on this Oklahoma City Thunder team that's the number 1 seed in the Western Conference. But Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, a player who's taken mid-first round with one of those picks in that trade, is going to finish second in MVP voting. Not most improved player, not best defensive player, but the most valuable player. And who knows, maybe he got enough, drummed up enough support to win MVP, but he's an MVP finalist. And realistically, it's between him and Nikola Jokic. But the NBA playoffs this year has kind of served as a reminder how risky of a play it is to put all your chips on the table for aging veterans with a high price tag. Coming up in the second hour, talking about some Shane Beamer comments about NIL and the program, college baseball, and much more. Second hour of the postgame show starts right now. I'm Elijah Campbell, not in for Jay Phillips because it's my show too. I'm here every day too. What am I saying? Jay is off today. He has got a lot of family business to tend to. As we know yesterday, if you missed the show yesterday and you want to see Jay dress like he is about to give a sermon, go back on our YouTube page at the Game TV Radio on YouTube, which is sponsored by Shepherd's Glass, and just take a look at it. It's really funny. I gave him a hard time because it's the first time I've ever seen him wear a tie, but he was dressing up because one of his daughters is graduating from South Carolina and getting a master's. That's impressive stuff. That's impressive stuff. So he's celebrating with the family today. They got a whole lot going on. He's transporting kids. He's making stuff happen for all the celebration that's going on this weekend. So a much needed time away from the radio for Jay Phillips. But it's me and Captain Dave here manning the fort up until 6 o'clock. Got a whole lot to get into right now. And I'll go ahead and start with, we've talked about this a lot, right? And it's the topic of team building and what a head coach in college football has to deal with in terms of balancing running your program in a traditional sense and handling, NIL, transfer portal recruiting, re-recruiting your own players after the season. It's just added a really different dynamic, right? You don't know what your roster is going to look like year in, year out, and teams with different types of resources kind of are handcuffed to certain ways of doing things. Captain Dave, if you don't mind, cut 8. Shane Beamer was on ESPN. I think it was Marty McGee, was asked about, this specific thing, balancing running your program and handling NIL in the whole new world of college athletics.
For us, it starts in recruiting, making sure we're doing our best to bring in, obviously, great players, but great people, guys that want to be at South Carolina for the right reasons and understand what this place can do for them on and off the field, football-wise, academically, life after football. And guys that want to be a part of this. And, I want to be able to reward guys and take care of guys that have earned it. And we just try and be honest 365 days a year. I don't want it to get to this week when the portal's open and all of a sudden we're having conversations about where they stand and how we feel about them and how they feel about us. To me, those are things that we do every day throughout the year when we're around our guys, and we want to make this a program that guys want to be a part of. And to me, you can't put a price tag on the college experience and the locker room and the degree that you can earn and winning football games and playing in the SEC and things like that. So we try and treat people the right way, be honest with them, make them want to be a part of this program. And if somebody feels like he'd be in a better situation somewhere else, then, have those conversations, and they're open and honest conversations. And then if they decide to leave, we wish them well, and it gives us the opportunity to try and get somebody else in here that can continue to move this program forward.
I think that's what Shane's best attribute is as a recruiter, is the honesty. And it's not just from that clip there, right? I mean, I think you gathered a little bit of what his recruiting philosophy is in terms of being honest with these guys, not promising any starting spots, not guaranteeing anything. But when there was the media availability day over at the facility back in February, I had a chance to talk to a lot of the transfer players, ranging from Robbie Ashford, who is competing for a starting spot right now, a guy who transferred from Oregon to Auburn, now Auburn to South Carolina, and his entire career has been battling for playing time. Like, he has been scrapping and clawing for playing time his entire career. Even to guys like Rocket Sanders, who are, stars, was a star at Arkansas and is looking for a place to get one last good college season in, and all types of players, receivers from Gage Larvidan to Jared Brown, who are going to be in a crowded wide receiver room, to someone like Gerald Kilgore, who's going to be playing with his brother Jalen Kilgore, who is going to be playing in a crowded defensive backfield because you got a lot of key players coming back in that department. And the one common denominator, because I like to ask exactly with transfer players, like, what's the selling point, right? Because when it comes to, like, revenue of the athletic department, you're above average. You're in the SEC, so you're naturally going to be above average, but you're not like Ohio State, right? Like, Ohio State's the richest athletic department in terms of, like, producing revenue in the country, and there's a good report on The Athletic about how Ohio State unlocked their NIL potential and quote unquote won the college football offseason. And it's a well-written report by Cameron Teague Robinson. Loved the story, but a lot of the story was talking about them upgrading facilities and having the money to raise the assistant coach budget, which is how they were able to, get Chip Kelly from being the bleeping head coach at UCLA to come be the offensive coordinator. They made it worth his time, right? Like, you're not the head coach anymore. You're just the offensive coordinator. They made that worth his time because they're able to give him a lot of money because they've just put in a ton of it because they vomit millions at that university, right? And it's not that way at places like South Carolina or Mississippi State or Arkansas. So you have to take a different angle to this. And the angle that Shane Beamer, I've noticed just from talking to players that he has recruited, is that he's honest with them. He's not going to sell them, he's not going to sell them a pipe dream. He's not going to tell a quarterback, that, if you're going to come to South Carolina, you're going to be the starter day one. He's not making that promise. He didn't make the promise to guys like Gerald Kilgore that he's going to start from day one. He didn't make the promise to Robbie Ashford, but he promised him a chance to compete. He promised him the opportunity to be a part of a team, to be able to compete for the starting job. And hopefully, if things go well, that can get that player advanced to what their ultimate goal is, whether it be just to play for an SEC school, whether to play big-time college football, or even to be able to go to the next level and get drafted, right? I think it is a pretty good sign that Xavier Legette had a breakout year, was able to parlay that into a first-round draft selection, where he's getting first-round draft selection money with a fifth-year option. Yeah. That's attractive. And that's good. That is a good show on player development, right? That's a good thing that this coaching staff can say, hey, look, we didn't promise this guy anything when he got to South Carolina. He had to wait his turn. And he got better. He stuck with it. He got better. And the fruits of his labor ended up being delicious because it turned into being a first-round pick in the NFL draft. But they're honest with people. And I think that's really the big thing right now. And look, each team deals with something different because you have different budgets, you have different NIL responsibilities, different NIL capabilities. Like, that's the one thing when reading the story in The Athletic about Ohio State, like, they're able to get Will Howard from Kansas State, who was an all-Big 12 quarterback. They were able to get Quinshon Judkins, who was the leading rusher for Ole Miss and was an all-SEC running back the entirety of his time in Oxford, Mississippi. They were able to just fork over a ton of cash and bring in really good players that were available in the transfer portal, as well as be able to keep some of the players that were on last year's team. Denzel Burke, cornerback. All the NFL draft potential. He's staying in Ohio State because he wants to beat Michigan. A lot of them were quoted saying they just want to beat Michigan because they haven't in 3 years. He wants to beat Michigan. And he wants a chance to play at a national championship and be able to do something for Ohio State.
Right-hand lane is blocked on I-26. It's going to be eastbound, right? Which is inbound.
And same thing for some other guys, like Emeka Egbuka, wide receiver, all Big Ten second team in 2022. Had a really solid
right-hand lane is blocked on I-26 eastbound just after exit 91.
Marvin Harrison Jr.
Columbia Avenue.
He's back.
Also, 20 eastbound at Bush River Road, a wreck. 20 westbound at Broad River Road. 20 westbound at 126.
They can do that because they can throw wads of cash at them, right? They can make it worth their while. I'm not saying these guys are solely mercenaries that are following money. No, Ohio State football is
not a good Friday afternoon. I-26 eastbound just after Columbia Avenue, exit 91, Chapin exit. Right-hand lane is blocked there. 20 westbound Broad River Road. 20 eastbound at Bush River Road. 20 westbound at I-26. 26 between Broad River Road
about Shane Beamer. We can argue about on-field results from last season because last year's going to be a point of contention. We're going to be talking about last season. We have been, and we're going to continue to all summer because that's the sample size we have. The latest
two wrecks both sides of the road, I-26 east and westbound between the 97 and the 91.
Is that
also 77 north at
there's a lot of honesty there, and these players trust them. And they start to trust each other. Yesterday we had Demetrius Knight in, who is the transfer linebacker from Charlotte. Demetrius has played in a lot of rooms, right? He's played a lot of college football. He started his career.
How's this I-26 east and westbound between the Peak exit and the Chapin exit?
And now is playing.
Left-hand lane is blocked on the eastbound side, and Also, the right-hand lane
that he really appreciated wasn't just the honesty, but the ability to get guys together and for them to be able to assimilate well and gel.
Contradicting.
They've done that really well. Like a lot of that defense, man, is transfer
3 wrecks on I-26
They've done a really good
eastbound.
Job of gelling.
Two of them
for the
between
guys
the
that
peak exit
are on the team
and
right
the
now.
Chapin exit,
Williams
and on the westbound side, again, between the peak and
those guys are solid bedrocks of your defense, and they're able to allow all these transfers in, and they've just assimilated really well.
3 wrecks, I-26, 2 of them on the eastbound side between Chapin exit and the peak exit, and 1 on the westbound side between the peak exit and the Chapin exit.
But he's been in
20 eastbound Bush River Road, a wreck. 20 westbound Broad River Road, a wreck. And also 20 westbound at I-26, 77 northbound Blythewood Road. This is Captain Dave, WIS-TV Traffic Center.
Starts with the honesty and the recruiting process. So the one thing, when I listened to that quote earlier today, it's one thing that checks out, because head coaches can say a lot of things in these interviews, and it could be a lot of lip service, right? There are so many coaches, and you're all listening right now, have one in your head of an example of a coach who will say anything for good lip service and turn around, and their actions prove completely different, right?
A lot of misses this afternoon between the Chapin exit and the peak exit. 2 wrecks, left-hand lane and right-hand lane is blocked. I-26 eastbound. Westbound side between the peak exit and the Chapin exit, we have a wreck there as well. Then we got 3 on I-20, 20 eastbound Bush River Road, 20 westbound at Broad River Road, and 20 west at I-26. Then we have I-77. This is going to be northbound Blythewood Road, a big wreck there.
They can get into some D2 schools that are really good at basketball, right? And the one thing he always tries to make an effort to do is to never discourage them from taking that. Right? We were on the phone the other day, and he was talking about, the 6'7" wing that would fit great in his system, where they love to press and shoot threes and shoot fast in the shot clock. He goes, this guy is tailor-made to play for my offense. But if he's able to get into this school, they can offer him $20,000 in an NIL deal, even at a D2 level. And I told him, if you get in, take it. Like, I almost won't let you come to this campus, because that's a good deal, and that's better than what we can offer you. And if you can at least establish that level of trust with a lot of players, where they know that you're in for their best interest too, they're going to give 110% for you whether they play for you or not. They'll always go to bat for you. And I think that's a good way to start. Even in an era of college athletics where relationships are transactional, I think a good sign for Gamecock fans is I think you do have a coach who at least knows how this works, and I think he really gets it. A lot of coaches complain about it, and that's what ends up hurting them. Jim Boeheim in basketball complained about it till the cows came home. Tom Izzo complained about it till the cows came home, and they haven't had a ton of success. And they're losing more players than they were gaining. Boeheim's now retired, but Izzo loses more players than he gains. You got to embrace it, even if you don't like it, but you got to be real with these kids. And that's one of the many things in terms of relationship building that goes in with being the GM of your football team, as well as the head coach, and all the opportunities, the CEO responsibilities that are bestowed upon you for taking that job. We'll take a quick pivot here to the baseball diamond. Big series tonight in Como. It's not a big series because Missouri is, the 2001 Yankees or 98 Yankees. But it's a big series because losing it can hurt you in the RPI in one of the strongest spots that you have on your resume. And there's a few ways that Murphy's Law might be able to poke out its eerie head and take into effect this weekend. I'll tell you what that is when the postgame show continues. My plans tonight on this Friday night are fairly simple. Going to leave here at 6 when we go off the air. Going to listen to the pregame show in my car starting at 6:45 with Stuart Lake and Derek Scott. And then when I get home, I'm going to keep them on my radio, and I'm going to watch some playoff basketball, and I want to get in on the action via my friends at Prize Picks. Prize Picks, the #1 fantasy sports app with over 3 million active members, and I'm going all in tonight, going more on the player projection for Jarrett Allen. Points 14.5. Look, the Cavaliers haven't shot particularly well. He is a rebounding monster. I think he's going to get a lot of second chance points tonight too. And look, if Jarrett Allen somehow got hurt tonight, don't want to speak that into existence, but if he did and didn't return for the second half, Prize Picks won't count as a loss. It's called injury insurance, and so it separates it from other apps. Join me on the app. Download the app today. Use promo code 1075GAME for a first deposit match up to $100. That's 1075GAME. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. I like beer. Plan on drinking some tonight. And I love craft beer specifically. Big IPA guy here. And a little inside baseball here. Big fan of Columbia Craft. Might get some of that tonight too. But I could get discounted Columbia Craft. I could get discounted Peak Drift. I can get discounted beers at Craft and Draft. A lot of different places, right? If I invest in the craft beer card, because the craft beer card is back. Oh, it's back. And you go to 1075thegame.com, click on Sweet Deals, and you'll be able to get yourself a $360 value for only $79. Remember in the first hour of the show when I talked about Tobias Harris being $39 million of an investment and you got 0 points from him for the Sixers in Game 6 last night? Yuck. But 41 points and 12 assists from Jalen Brunson, who's only getting $25 million from the Knicks to win you a game, that's a value. This craft beer card is last night's Jalen Brunson. People are saying it. I'm just relaying it. So go to 1075thegame.com, click on Sweet Deals, and hook yourself up with a craft beer card. Talking about this baseball series tonight and tomorrow and on Sunday, a big one for South Carolina solely because your resume has a strength to it that not a lot of teams in the top 10 of the RPI have. This weekend, it's a quad 2 series, right? Missouri's RPI is not very good, but by virtue of just playing it on the road, it's going to be a quad 2 series. You already have a decent amount of true road wins, but if you sweep Missouri, you can get up to 9 true road wins, which puts you kind of in the upper echelon of a lot of teams that are in the top 10 in the RPI. It'd be hard to get Kentucky, who's leading with 14, or Indiana State also leading with 14. Actually, UC Irvine, my bad. Overlooked them. The Anteaters have won 15 true road games. But it gets you a little more comparable, right, with a lot of those teams. But if you look at a lot of the teams that are in the top 10 in the RPI, a lot of them have some flaws in terms of losing games outside of the first quadrant, right? North Carolina has 3 losses in quad 2 alone. East Carolina, who's number 7 in RPI, has 7 losses outside of the first quadrant. Shoot, Clemson's got 7 losses outside of quad 1. Kentucky's got a quad 4 loss, and they've got 4 additional in the second and third quadrant. So, and these are all top 10 teams in the RPI. But what makes South Carolina's record and their resume top 10 worthy is because they have an 18-2 record outside of the first quadrant. And if you sweep Missouri this weekend, that puts you at 21-2. 21-2 is eye-popping. 20-3 is too, which would just necessitate winning. That just means you win the series, taking 2 of 3. You'd still be at 20-3, but 21-2 is eye-popping. 21-2 is sexy, and that looks really good on a resume. And this is going to be the last series outside the first quadrant you play all year. Now, if you take care of business, if you end up sweeping Missouri and you beat Winthrop and Rock Hill, that will end your season because Georgia and Tennessee are both Q1s. That will end your season. You'll end the season with 22-2 record outside of the first quadrant. So even if you are 500 in that ultimate first quadrant, your strength of schedule is so high to the point where it's fair to say that your only real losses in some series are to serious contenders like Arkansas and Texas A&M. Clemson, as painful as it is to hear, Clemson beat you twice, but it doesn't hurt you because those are all, they're inside the top 5 in RPI. And you got some wins, and you got to win a series win against Kentucky. But the big thing here, what you don't want to do is drop 2 of 3. Not only is it a momentum killer, because you're coming off of, or you got a winning streak going on, you think you figured something out with the bats. You've scored 38 runs in the last 23 innings. You've gotten run rule wins your last 2 games against teams in the top 54 in the RPI, one of whom is number 2 in the RPI. You got a lot of good things going for you. This batting lineup is clicking. You found a recipe to maximize your bats, and you found a weekend rotation to maximize some of the strengths of your pitchers. Tonight, Roman Kimball's going to be on the mound, and then tomorrow, Eli Jones is going to be on the mound. And it's got TBA in there for Sunday, but as I joke with Stuart Lake all the time, I don't expect somebody with the name TBA to be taking the mound on Sunday. I expect it to be Dylan Eskew. Good sinker ball pitcher who's pitching his best right now. Maybe he didn't have the best start to the season, but he's pitching his best ball right now. This is massive for South Carolina to be able to take care of this opportunity. And I want to use what Preston Thorne said this morning, make the Georgia and Tennessee games more significant. This might be a little reverse psychology thing here. I thought he made a really good point, and it's one that I never really thought of. But if you're Mark Kingston, do you tell them, hey, look ahead at Georgia and Tennessee. Tennessee number 8 in RPI. Georgia number 9 in RPI. Georgia only a game behind you in the SEC East standings, because don't forget, you're still playing for climbing the standings, too, to get the best seed possible in the SEC tournament, where you can only rack up more Q1 wins. But those games aren't as important if you drop the series here in Como. It's a good idea. A good idea to maybe use some reverse psychology. But there are a few things that can make things go terribly wrong. There are a few things that concern me because there are habits this team has shown throughout the year that's cost them every now and then. We'll start off with errors. Now, I wouldn't blame errors for some of the losses they've had this year. But look, it's well documented that this change offensively in the batting lineup has had an effect defensively. Gavin Casas, in the few games he's been at third base, has committed a couple errors. It hasn't cost you anything. It hasn't cost you games, I would say. But they are, nonetheless, errors. Ethan Petrie's made some good plays at first, but he's not 100% a seasoned first baseman. He's even mentioned it's taken some adjusting to. He even dropped the, it is what it is line when it comes to playing first base. I know he'd rather be out there in right field probably. But there's a little bit of a shift here. And if you do get in a close game, and Missouri is playing you really well, and they do, for the first time in conference season, decide to hit the ball, because always good hitting beats great pitching. If they're able to hit the ball and put it in play, and you're not able to take advantage of those outs, they can cost you a game or two. That's the thing. The Philadelphia Phillies, and this is the example I've used all week, but the Philadelphia Phillies, a couple of years ago, decided to go all in on power, right? All in on like the modern baseball strategy of, we don't care how many times we strike out. We want to get the best chance to hit a home run every time we step up to plate. That's why Kyle Schwarber was hitting leadoff for the Philadelphia Phillies, right? That's why they invested in Nick Castellanos, who hit a ton of home runs in his year in Cincinnati, made him an attractive free agent option. Bryce Harper's already built for that. Rhys Hoskins built for it, right? They might not be great in the field. Some of them might be minuses in the field, ultimately. But they used that, and they struggled some. It was a struggle. The Phillies, with the year they went to the World Series, weren't great at the All-Star break. They had to go on a run. They had to figure some things out, and they fueled it to where when you got to postseason baseball, and you're talking about small series with everything on the line, they maximized that hitting lineup, shocked the world, and beat the Atlanta Braves, and won the pennant. That's because of that lineup optimization. Now they had really good pitching. It helps to have Aaron Nola, I understand, and it helps to have a solid bullpen. But that hitting lineup was an absolute beast in the postseason, and they used the long ball to win them a ton of games. Not saying South Carolina is going to go out here and continue to hit 5 home runs in a game, or 4 like they did against East Tennessee. We'll still keep it in the park, but this is the optimal hitting lineup that hopefully the mistakes that are made in the field by way of optimizing this lineup don't hurt you. You just hope you don't see that this weekend. I don't see a lot of pathways for Missouri winning that game, but one of them is potential error or two in the field. There are 2 more things that can possibly slip up South Carolina in this series, and I'll tell you what those 2 things are as hour number 2 of the postgame show rolls on.
Someone coming off of the Chapin exit trying to get on the 26 got slammed in the back there. So there's a wreck there that is eastbound, westbound on between, let's see, the Peak exit and the Chapin exit. Got a wreck there. 20 westbound at Broad River Road, 20 westbound at I-26, 20 eastbound at Bush River Road, 77 north at Blythewood Road, Gervais Millwood, Assembly near Calhoun, Spears Creek Church Road at Wood Creek Farms, and Two Notch Road at North Grampian Hills. A lot of wrecks. It's Friday afternoon. It's Captain Dave, WIS TV Traffic Center.
You can listen to us here on the game, 107.5 here in Columbia, 100.5 in Florence, 100.3 in Myrtle Beach, and also on the 107.5 The Game app. If you haven't downloaded that, what are you doing? You can hear us anywhere on the app, whether it be South Carolina, you could be in Alaska, you could be in another country. It doesn't matter. Download the app, listen to us anytime, and you have easy access to our podcast page. We're also streaming live on The Game TV on YouTube at The Game TV Radio, and that is sponsored by Shepherd's Glass, a true reflection of quality. Talking about the things that could possibly go wrong with South Carolina this weekend in Como. I've talked about it this week a little bit in terms of I don't expect the venue to be a problem. I'm going to mention the things that might happen that could give South Carolina or put them behind the 8 ball, rather. But people talk about Columbia, Missouri kind of being like this really weird place where, you know, baseballs disappear into the void and gravity might not exist and it's cold all the time and the weather being weird and nobody going to the games and a lack of enthusiasm or juice in the stadium being a reason that it makes it a tough place to play because you're not accustomed to it. Not buying that for this series. I maybe could buy that for an excuse as to why Florida got swept by Missouri a month and a half ago, whenever it was. I maybe can buy that, but I'm not going to buy that for this series. The weather, temperature-wise, is going to be fine. It might dip into the 50s, the high 50s. Really, the biggest concern is rain, and that's just a concern of getting all your games in. But I talked about the errors in the field because of your new defensive alignment being solely constructed by the optimization it gives your batting lineup. That is one thing that could bite you in this series. Another thing is striking out. Now, they've done a better job at avoiding the strikeout as of late. They've had some stinkers, but in the last couple of games, this year they've had some stinkers. In the Kentucky series, they were a little better. The first game, you struck out 16 times. Not optimal. You struck out 14 times in the second game. But in the second game in the third game of the series, second one with the optimal lineup, you only struck out 6 times. And you walked 6 times. You drew 6 walks. I like that ratio, right? That's not bad. You can live with that. You're going to strike out sometimes, but don't have that number in the double digits. Don't have multiple guys striking out 2 or 3 times, even though that is something this team has kind of done for a good chunk of the year. And against East Tennessee State, you only struck out 6 times. So for a team that has found themselves seeing a lot of Ks be put up on the board by opposing pitchers, in the last 2 games, they've done a little bit better of a job at it. 2 of the 3 games with this new offensive lineup, you've limited your strikeouts. Ironically enough, the only team that has struck out more than South Carolina this year in SEC play is indeed Missouri. So maybe they do strike out 15 times tonight. They could probably still win because Missouri might strike out 15 times too. But that's what kills rallies. That's what kills having runners on base. That's what kills somebody from not winning our $1,100 grand prize for the Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union Grand Slam giveaway. You don't have an opportunity for luck to happen, for a ball to kind of get carried out by the wind for a grand slam home run if you can't at least put it in play. And that's been my biggest thing this year. My biggest gripe with this team, and the thing that I think has held them back the most at times, is that sometimes when they don't hit well with runners in scoring position, it's not that they're not hitting well, it's that they're striking out with runners in scoring position. So I will no longer cite batting average with runners in scoring position to determine if this team's improving. I will end up, looking at it through a scope of, are they striking out with runners in scoring position to better gauge exactly how well this team is doing in those clutch situations and those RBI opportunities. You just can't strike out in this series. Look, Missouri, their pitching isn't as bad as their hitting, right? Like, well, if you look at Missouri, the batting numbers, it's bad. Like, they're last in the SEC in almost every major statistical category. That includes batting average. That includes runs. That includes home runs, RBI, total bases, slugging percentage, strikeouts, and on-base percentage. And they're tied for last in the SEC in doubles hit, tied with Ole Miss. So they can thank Ole Miss for just being bad enough at getting the second bag to where they're not last in that category too. And while Missouri's not that comically bad pitching in terms of being last in a lot of basic important statistics when it comes to Southeastern Conference play, they are about 11th in almost everything else, right? You go and you look at the leaderboards for pitching numbers are 11th in earned run average. They're 11th in opponent batting average. They are 11th in strikeouts. They're 11th in batters striking out looking. They clearly don't get a lot of wins, dead last in that. And look, there's nowhere when you look at rankings where this pitching staff for Missouri stacks up. They don't strike out a lot of guys either, and they strike out a lot at the plate. Just don't help them. That's my thing. Put a lot of balls in play. Make them have to make plays to throw you out. Because even in this lineup, there's a lot of speed. I've loved what Austin Brindling has given this team. And my favorite thing about him lately, hadn't been striking out a ton. He's done a really good job of putting the ball in play. He did strike out against East Tennessee State. Didn't strike out in the second game in the run rule game against Kentucky. And he was able to put a lot of balls in play that help bring runs home, right? Because the bottom of the lineup was hitting really well. And he's got a ton of speed to where he can leg out a slow grounder down the third base line. Love what he's brought you. And if you can just keep that momentum of just putting the bat on the ball, you're going to be amazed at what that does in this game alone. So errors, striking out, and of course, striking out does kind of lead to this thing too, but stranding runners, right? You can't strand a lot of runners. I think you're going to get a lot of runners. I know. I don't want to pose that as it's, some prediction or some bold hypothesis or some take. No, you're going to get a lot of base runners. I just reeled off the stats that Missouri's outside the top 10 of in pitching, and a lot of that is giving up hits. When you're looking at even just like the ERA of a lot of the pitchers that are going to be starting for Missouri, it's not good. They give up contact. So you're going to get on base. Tonight they're starting Logan Lunsford, who has a 7.04 ERA. Yuck. Tomorrow, Javin Pimentel will be on the mound. He's got a 3.64 ERA, strikes out 13 guys. He's probably their best pitcher in terms of just statistics. But they do give up a lot of hits. You're going to get a lot of base runners. You just cannot strand them. You can't have a situation like you did in the Clemson game where even though you faced really good pitching and you were able to get situations where there are runners on second and third, or maybe runners on the corners with someone like Ethan Petrie or Cole Messina up, you got to be able to take advantage of those. Because the one thing about Murphy's Law is if you don't take advantage of some of the gimmies, the worst thing that can happen sometimes can happen. And the best advice I ever got from any coach, and the one that it's advice I still use to this day when it comes to talking on the radio and giving analysis, is that if you are in a game with a bad team and you let them hang around and you don't take care of your business, luck just can't happen. It can happen, but more than likely luck will happen. Ground balls might start going in between legs when they don't normally, a la Bill Buckner. Or in basketball, teams that don't normally shoot a lot of threes and make a lot of threes might just start seeing the basket turn into an ocean. and everything you throw up goes in because you're not taking care of your business. Sports have a funny way of making you pay for not taking care of the basics. Take care of the basics in Como. Don't strike out a ton. Don't commit a ton of errors. And don't strand your runners. And you'll be fine. I think they'll still even sweep the series. I feel pretty confident about that. The best player in the SEC will be coming to Columbia, South Carolina next week. Georgia comes into town for next week's series. We'll look ahead a little bit to that as well because they've got a player who not only is the favorite to be the number one pick in the MLB draft, but he has put up some numbers that you have to see and hear to believe that they're even real. I'll tell you what those are as hour number 2 of the postgame show concludes. Make sure you stay tuned here at this time in the next hour, meaning it'll be the last segment of the show. But we're going to end today's show with a bang. Not a literal bang, but we're going to have a little bit of fun. We're the last couple days this week. I have played what has been one of my new favorite games with Jay Phillips. That is, guess this NBA player if it's real or a creation of my imagination. Real or fake? Jay hasn't particularly played pretty well. 2 for 6 the first time, 3 of 6 the second, and Preston Thorne was 3 of 6 today. But I wanted to have some more fun today on a Friday. I wanted a nice little Fugazi Friday segment, all right? What's real? What's fact? What's fiction? What's Fugazi? And unfortunately for poor Dave Adair, he is going to be sitting in the hot seat today behind the glass for this edition of not NBA players this time, but today's game. And I feel like I'm Jigsaw here, asking if you'd like to play a game. But this game is, Dave, you're going to pick which of the 5 matchups of high school sports across the entire country with schools with odd names is real or made up. Are you prepared for this? Are you ready for the challenge?
If I lose or get less than everybody else, does something happen bad?
If you go over, we'll think of something. We'll have to have a punishment. You can't go over. If you go 0 for 5, then we might have to think of something.
Oh, boy. Like stand out on the street in my underwear or something and wait.
Ooh, or like that Allstate commercial where the guy's like in a little baby tricycle or whatever and half of his head shaved. Or what would be really funny, this was the punishment in my fantasy football league this past year that I was in with a bunch of my friends.
Yeah.
We had a deal that if you finished last in the league, you had to take the ACT.
Wow.
You had to schedule time out of a weekend and go take the ACT with a bunch of high schoolers. And if you go over, we might have to apply that here. I think I would pay for you to take the ACT.
No, I don't like that at all. Can't remember what time the train left the station at 9 a.m. and goes to a tunnel.
All those stupid, really wordy questions.
Yeah, right. No, I'm not into that.
We'll think of something.
I'll do the underwear in the street. That'd be better. No,
I was just saying more likely
I'm
to do
kidding
the
there.
in the street.
Can't do that.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, we might get in trouble for that one. I don't know. Maybe there might be some, indecency laws that we might be breaking with that. But, it's on the table. We'll keep it on the table. We'll take all suggestions. Call us, 803-404-6100. Text us, 803-404-6100. Or comment if you're watching on YouTube right now in the comments. We will take possible punishments if Dave goes over. Or if anyone goes over. We might start making that a normal thing. But I mentioned it before the segment, and we're going to close out this hour with some mind-popping stats. Like, I've kept up with Georgia baseball this year because they're in the SEC. They're top 10 in the RPI. They're obviously a really good team. And they're coming to Columbia next week. Now, Mark Kingston and the Gamecocks aren't going to be looking ahead. They're not going to be looking past Missouri. And they're definitely not going to be looking past Winthrop next week. They shouldn't. Or if you ask Preston Thorne, maybe they should. But our job here is to look ahead, right? We can do that. And I was scrolling through some numbers because I know that Charlie Condon from Georgia is the favorite to be the #1 pick in the Major League Baseball draft this summer. And I was reading on him a little bit. A good story from Seth Emerson, a friend of the show who's been on a few times, wrote about him in The Athletic. He covers Georgia mainly. But he mentioned all the things that Charlie Condon is nationally ranked in. And he's first in a lot of things. This guy's not just a home run hitter. He's leading the entire country in home runs. He's hit 30 home runs this season. That alone is enough to be like, oh, I got to see this kid play. I got to see him play in person, right? I got to check this out. But he's got a batting average of .456. A .456 batting average. He's cranked out 30 home runs. The batting average is #1 in the country as well. He's top 10 in RBI with only 63. Only 63. I say only because he's not the best in the country at that. He's got a slugging percentage of over 1,000. He's got 62 runs, which is top 6 in the country. And my favorite stat, the one that I literally refreshed my computer because I couldn't believe that I've ever seen an OPS this high, with like a decent enough sample size, right? Like some OPS numbers are really high early in the year when you've only played 5 or 6 games and you have a small sample size. But Georgia's played 44 games this year. Charlie Condon's played almost all of them. And his OPS, which is your on-base percentage plus your slugging percentage, is 1,651 or 1651. Right? Like in the major leagues, if your OPS is around 700, that's considered average. If it's 900 or 850 or above, that's good. 900 is like all-star status. And if you're over 1,000, you might be considered to be an MVP at some point in time. And he's over doubled what the Major League Baseball average would be. Now, naturally, a lot of slugging percentages and on-base percentages are higher in college because the pitching's not as good. So it's hard to project like, oh, he's going to do that in the majors. But not quite true, but anytime you're hitting 1651 for an OPS at the SEC level, where you're constantly playing the best college pitching in the country, it's pretty remarkable. And I've done a lot of preview of the Missouri series because that's the one we got this weekend. And that's the one we can watch on TV, the one we can enjoy Como from afar. But next weekend, you got your hands full with Georgia. Don't let their under 500 record in the SEC fool you because they have an absolute monster in the heart of that lineup who has terrorized everybody with his bat. And he's a player to really start keeping an eye on as the regular season winds down in the conference. Final hour number 3, 5 o'clock news is next.
A wreck on 126, right as it joins up with I-26, is really off of the road there, but that right-hand lane has some emergency vehicles in there. And if you're coming off of Greystone, getting onto 126, this is heading outbound, you're going to have a bit of a problem there. In addition, we got Assembly Street near Calhoun. It's going to be at Whaley. Then Trentham Road at Decker Boulevard and Platte Springs Road at Emmanuel Church Road by the airport. So do be careful out there this afternoon. Captain Dave, WIS TV Traffic Center.
It's 5 o'clock. So you know what that means. It means it's time to go ahead and rattle off some news, the latest news from around the sports world. As always, brought to you by our friends at Integrated Media. I actually hung out with Michael Geddes a little bit today. Came into the studio to fix some wires to a camera that we may or may not have broken. I'm going to plead the fifth on how they were broken. I don't think it was me, but you never know. But he came in, fixed it, and now we've got all of our camera angles back. So whenever, Captain Dave answers my questions here at the very end of this hour, you're not going to want to miss that. Whenever Captain Dave answers the question of whether or not this high school sports matchup in the country is real or fake, we'll be able to see him a little more clear than we maybe could have before. But 5 o'clock news rolling along right now. We'll go ahead and start with the one yesterday that broke actually in the middle of the 5 o'clock hour, and that is that Kirby Smart has received an extension, which will make him, or give him, I guess, the most lucrative college football coaching contract in the sports history. 10 years, $130 million. That is going to be $13 million a year. It's a little over a jump from what he had before this. But look, Georgia's going to lock him down. He's won 2 national championships, and if it wasn't for maybe a bad handoff from Carson Beck, and maybe a lackadaisical offensive second and third quarter in the SEC championship game, he probably has 3 in a row, for being honest with ourselves. That team was probably the best in college football. The only team I would accept as being a better team last year was Michigan, because they went undefeated, ran the table, and no one could score a ton of points on Michigan. It didn't matter if J.J. McCarthy only had to throw the ball 8 times. But Georgia's locked in Kirby Smart, highest paid coach in the history of college football, and he'll be a thorn in the side of the rest of the SEC for at least another decade. And I have a feeling that if you win another national championship or 2, that's going to get extended even further. I wouldn't be surprised until the shelf life runs out. A good point that was made on the early game this morning. I was on with Preston Thorne and Jen Jensen, and Preston made a point, because we were talking about this morning. Preston made a point that this is an eye-popping deal right now, but maybe this becomes a bargain in the future. And that's a good point. Like, think about it. You sign him to a 10-year extension right now, $13 million a year, with the money that's about to get, funneled into all these programs, with new TV contracts, with the expanded college football playoff, the growing interest in the sport. Despite all of its changes, it is still growing massively. The money to give coaches for, on their contracts and their salaries is going to grow as well. Look, Texas A&M is forking over $70+ million just for Jimbo Fisher to get the hell out of College Station. That probably isn't happening in college athletics 10 years ago, to be frank with you. That's not happening. So whenever we keep seeing this money go up and the sport continue to generate a ton of revenue, let's say in 5 years, Kirby wins them 1 more and gets them to maybe 2 more championship games or 2 more national semifinals and multiple SEC championships. And somebody like Steve Sarkisian at Texas continues his good run over there in Austin by going to a couple more college football playoffs, by contending for SEC titles, for being good enough for them to want to keep him long term. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that they end up giving him more money to entice him to stay, to keep him from maybe going to the NFL or, a place like one of the few schools in the country that can outbid them, like Ohio State. If Ryan Day somehow still can't beat Michigan and it's been 5 or 6 years and they decide to can him despite going 11-1 every year, then maybe. But we're going to see some coaching contracts start to raise and go up and up and up. It's like the quarterback contracts every cycle. So-and-so's the highest paid quarterback in the history of the sport until 2 days later when another quarterback is signed to an extension. Mike Conley at one point in time was the highest paid player in NBA history, and he was for like 30 minutes until another superstar player got a contract that was bigger. So as of now, the most lucrative deal, 10 years, $130 million. Kirby Smart going to be locked up, hanging out in Athens for an awfully long time. About an hour or so before we aired at 3 o'clock, the Lakers, after getting beat in the Western Conference first round of the playoffs, have announced that they are firing head coach Darvin Ham. Darvin Ham becomes one of many head coaches who have lost their jobs when underperforming in a season where LeBron James is the centerpiece and star player. He joins the likes of, David Blatt, of Mike Brown, Paul Silas. Coaching LeBron James isn't for the faint of heart. Frank Vogel got fired as the second coach that the Lakers have fired since LeBron James signed to play with L.A. in the summer of 2019. Not saying LeBron's totally the issue. I'm just saying that with the Los Angeles Lakers, we're going to editorialize a little bit here, as Jay would say, their problem isn't coaching. Right? If you want to go back, I made a pretty elaborate argument in the first hour of the show about how poorly NBA teams are running their franchises and how it is an awful, miserable blueprint to try to follow in modern pro sports, in which the best deals are the rookie deals, and the best thing you can have if you don't have success on the court or the field is draft capital and assets, right? If you don't have those, then you don't have a future, then you're going all in, and that's a high risk that it flops. Not everyone's the Los Angeles Rams. The Lakers have invested about 70% of their salary cap in 2 players. They wasted a lot of draft capital trying to get Russell Westbrook in a trade that gave away Kyle Kuzma, solid scorer, solid scoring option on a team that won them an NBA championship, a solid role-playing big in Montrezl Harrell, who came off the bench. Hasn't been much since, but he played a good role in that Lakers team. And you also had Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, who was one of the best defensive perimeter players in the NBA and was an anchor on that team. And also a really good three-point shooter. Traded him away so you could get Russell Westbrook. In the midst of all that, they also couldn't sign Alex Caruso, who was a free agent, who still is one of the best perimeter defenders in the league right now and is having a blossoming career on the defensive side of the ball. You'll lose a lot of key pieces that it takes to win basketball games in exchange for what? Russell Westbrook, for the big name on paper, for him to shoot 5 for 20 in a game you have to have in late March and turn the ball over 9 times. But he's a star. Clippers fall in the same trap. Oftentimes the blame doesn't get appropriately placed, and today is an example of the blame not getting appropriately placed. Was Darvin Ham ever going to be accused of being Red Auerbach? Absolutely not. Is he ever going to be accused of being Pat Riley? Absolutely not. Or Phil Jackson, Greg Popovich, insert legendary coach here? Never. Darvin Ham will not sniff the Hall of Fame unless he gets an invite to speak for somebody who he's going to help induct into the Hall of Fame. But I didn't think he was bad enough to get the boot. But the Lakers gave him the boot. So the Lakers are going to be in the hunt for a new coach. The Clippers in the NBA coaching ranks are planning to extend Tyronn Lue. They're currently in discussions. Now, they still have a game tonight. More than likely, they will get bounced. I don't feel good about their chances of making it past this round, but they are in talks with extending Tyronn Lue, which I think is a pretty good call. I think Tyronn Lue's a fine coach. May never be a Hall of Famer, but he won a title And LeBron's always been highly complimentary of him, and he's got a really good reputation in the league as a pretty good, architect of offense. Their season's probably going to end tonight. That's neither here nor there. An interesting one that's developed here in the last 30 minutes, the NBA and sportsbooks discuss changes to player props. Now, this could be pretty significant because this could have some precedent across the country with the NFL and other pro sports and even college sports. Because remember, Charlie Baker, the president of the NCAA, has been working overtime to ban college player props in certain states. There are states already that don't allow prop bets for college athletes, but Charlie Baker's trying to make that a universal thing, and the NBA is wanting to work with their sportsbook partners to discuss what exactly the best options are for maybe avoiding another Jonte Porter situation. Former Missouri Tiger Jonte Porter, by the way. It is Missouri Hate Weekend since we're playing them on the Diamond in Como. But former Missouri Tiger Jonte Porter is banned from the NBA because of a prop betting scandal. This is from a report for ESPN's David Purdom. It says, quote, since states began legalizing sports betting, this is from the gambling industry site Legal Sports Report. It reported the talks between NBA and these sports books. Quote, since states began legalizing sports betting in 2018, we have worked closely with betting operators as well as integrity monitoring organizations to put in place essential monitoring and reporting systems so that we are best positioned to identify potential betting anomalies and to act to protect the integrity of our game. That's from an ESPN spokesperson. I don't think you're going to be able to ban prop bets. Cat's out of the bag, toothpaste is out of the tube. Insert whatever analogy you want to use. It's not going away because states are making too much money. Casinos are making too much money. I joke all the time that they don't call it Caesar's Hut, man. It's Caesar's Palace because it is nice, and oftentimes they win. But the easiest thing that you could do in terms of being an athlete in a point-shaving scandal is to use it by prop bets. Sometimes it can be obvious if somebody is trying to have their team reach a certain point spread, maybe not win by as much, or maybe lose by a certain margin. That can be easier to detect. But if you have a prop bet of over 3.5 turnovers, you can make 4 accidents happen pretty easily. So this is interesting. This is a developing story that's going to be going on for a while, and we'll see exactly if there's anything that these leagues can do with their sports betting partners that funnel in, quite frankly, a ton of money, not just into the league, but into the broadcast. You can't escape a broadcast now without hearing about what the point spread is or what a player's, certain prop for, passing yards, rushing yards, receiving touchdowns, anything like that. It's inescapable. It's everywhere you go. Ubiquitous in the sports media world. Shoot, I think I even saw a Jonte Porter segment talking about this scandal on ESPN that was brought to you by ESPN Bet. Can't make it up. It's ironic. It's ubiquitous. And locally, the Gamecocks play tonight. I'm doing this a little backwards. We're going to go to the local here to end the 5 o'clock news segment. Roman Campbell is going to be on the mound for South Carolina, facing off against Missouri. They have a 3-game set with the Tigers, the Fighting Jonte Porters. Scandalous. Starting tonight, 6:45 pregame, 7 o'clock first pitch. Our man Derek Scott will be with another friend of the show, Stuart Lake, in the broadcast booth for that game tomorrow. Weather permitting, 3:45 pregame, 4 o'clock first pitch. Sunday, again, weather permitting, 1:45 pregame, 2 o'clock first pitch. And the last thing of our 5 o'clock news segment, I have some sad news. And it's not a baseball team that anybody's really invested in, but it's a wild stat that I had to kind of see to believe. Maryland East Shore, very small, but a Division I school in a very small conference. They lost today. And you might be asking yourself, Elijah, why is that notable? Well, because this was game 39 for Maryland East Shore, and this is loss number 39. Maryland East Shore is 0-39. They have played almost 40 games, and they have yet to get a win. Not good. This is Bad News Bears-esque, and it almost makes you curious to be able to want to watch a game and see exactly how bad this is. Because you see something like that, like 0-39, and you almost refuse to believe it. The Northeast Conference tournament is coming up here relatively soon, so maybe they have a chance to sneak in a win because they're not playing in the NCAA tournament. I can go ahead and promise you that. But they're going to have some chances to get wins. May 7th, they're at George Mason. May 10th at Delaware State. 3-game series at Delaware State. You got UMBC on the road, and then a 3-game series to end their season with Sacred Heart. So, if you need somebody to pull for, that's not the South Carolina Gamecocks. And we're going to bandwagon as a show to cheer somebody on. My vote, it's the poor Maryland East Shore Eagles. They're 0-39. We got to get them one win. We got to help cheer them on to one win before this season ends. Before they go 0 for an entire year, which I don't think has ever happened. But now I'm curious to know if it has. 5 o'clock news segment, as always, brought to you by Integrated Media and our friends over with them that help put on our video stream. That is also sponsored by Shepherd's Glass and a whole lot more. They do a whole lot for us. Let them do a whole lot for you, for your home entertainment. We had a poll question. We'll revisit that when the postgame show continues. was listening to a podcast the other day, and it was a podcast called We're Not All Like This. Highly recommend it. Apple, Google Play, wherever you get your podcasts. I'll plug this one because I thoroughly enjoy listening to it. And it's good off-season type listening stuff. Whenever football and basketball aren't going on, I'm caught up with all my baseball podcasts. It's a good one to listen to. And it's Ryan Nanny, who worked with SB Nation for a while, and he currently does a lot of stuff with the Shutdown Fullcast. There's a very funny college football podcast. But he does another one that he teams up with Home Field Apparel, and they go through one school each episode. And with that school, they'll take about 3 people that are either in media or they are alums of the school and they've been going to games forever and have like a strong emotional investment. And the whole thing is there are questions about, the school's history. What are the defining moments of fanhood for that school, right? And this week was South Carolina. So one of the questions that Ryan asked the panelists was, who's South Carolina's biggest SEC villain, the biggest, rival in the Southeastern Conference? Because clearly the biggest rival is Clemson. Duh. The biggest boogeyman right now for South Carolina football is Dabo Swinney. Duh. But who's the biggest SEC villain right now? So I wanted to bring that to the attention of our audience. And so today's poll question I asked, this is at 1075 The Game on Twitter. Who would you vote as the most hateable opposing SEC head coach on the Gamecocks' upcoming schedule? Now, I limit it to just the Gamecocks' upcoming schedule because the SEC opponents for this season will be the same SEC opponents next year. You're just swapping where you're playing them, right? Like you're going to be hosting Ole Miss and LSU this year. Next year in 2025, you'll be playing at Ole Miss and at LSU and so on and so forth. So I got the list here, and this is based off some of the strongest responses that I got from Preston Thorne this morning when I was on in the early game with Preston and Jen. And we did an exercise of, mild, regular, spicy, or atomic. Like almost you're doing wing sauces in terms of like the heated hatred of these coaches. And the ones that got the strongest responses are the ones that I put in the poll. So the options are Missouri's Eli Drinkwitz, Ole Miss's Lane Kiffin, Kentucky's Mark Stoops, and LSU's Brian Kelly. And I'm not surprised that this coach is leading the poll because I see it. I get it. I'm not a huge fan of the guy either, and I can totally see why he's not likable in this market and with this football program. But Eli Drinkwitz having more than 51% of the vote, 51% of the vote with 4 contestants here, and just completely running away with this poll is surprising to me that it's that obvious, right? There's 140 votes, so we got a good sample size here, but well over half of the 140 votes say Eli Drinkwitz from Missouri. Now, he's had really good success against you, had a hard time beating him, despite him being Mr. 6-6. Before this past year when they went 11-2 and won the Cotton Bowl against Ohio State, like Eli Drinkwitz was kind of the closest thing to SEC Jeff Fisher, where it's 6-7, 6-6. Like I think he had 3 straight years of being 500 as the coach of Missouri, and then out of nowhere has this crazy good year. Who knows if it's replicable? They're bringing a lot of good pieces back, including Luther Burden, who's an all-world wide receiver. I get it. More than likely a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. Got a lot of good pieces coming back on a team that was really good last year. They're going to be really tough to beat. They're going to come here to Columbia, South Carolina later on this year at the back end of the schedule. But to see him as the number 1 villain for this program right now, surprising. Captain Dave, I know you have followed this program for your entire life, lifelong Gamecock fan. Historically, before I get you to answer this poll question yourself with who you hate the most out of these coaches, historically, and obviously Clemson excluded, you're the number 1 Clemson hater I know. It's fully transparent. There's not anybody that hates Clemson like Captain Dave Adair hates Clemson. But outside of Auburn with a Lake, what's the SEC school that you've kind of despised playing against the most?
Well, playing against the most, I despise going to LSU at night.
Hard place to win.
Yes,
yeah,
very hard.
Borderline impossible. Not many teams get out alive.
But I have affection for LSU. So
okay. So it's like a love-hate thing. You hate when your team has to play there, but you're not like cheering against LSU. You're not hate watching LSU.
No, I really kind of like them. Now, if you go, what team do I totally dislike? That's it's easy enough. It's Missouri.
Missouri. Oh wow! Yeah. So you would probably vote in this poll Eli Drinkwitz too. I would guess.
Absolutely.
Interesting. Any particular reason? Is it just because Eli Drinkwitz does, I guess, have some dorky qualities about him, some maybe inauthentic qualities? I mean, Preston Thorne's, his nickname for him as Eli Dorkwitz is funny. That's funny.
That's great.
You know, and I think he's a good coach. I don't think he's a great coach by any means, but the Eli Dorkwitz jab is one of my favorites anyone's thrown around here at this station.
Yeah, that's part of the reason. Another part of it is they came into the SEC, won 2 SEC East, went to the SEC championship game. You know, and since we've been in since '92, we've only gone once.
Yeah, you know what? I get that. That is kind of new kid on the block syndrome. They're coming in, they're doing all the things that you want to do, right?
Yeah, and their theme song should be New Kid in Town, I guess.
Classic Eagles jam.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. One of my favorite Eagles songs. That's a classic. I got a lot of favorite Eagles songs. Yeah. One of my favorite bands, but that's a good one.
Yep, it is a good one. But not Missouri, I would say.
See, that's fair. That's totally fair. And there was the year, so was it the second season, their second SEC championship game appearance? South Carolina actually had the best record in the SEC overall, but they lost that game to Tennessee on the road, and ultimately that was like the shouldn't have lost that game that prevented you from playing in Atlanta. That's a bummer. Like that would tick me off pretty bad.
Yeah, and you know, was that the year that we won every game in the SEC East?
Yep.
And
with the exception.
That was terrible. Even Coach Spurrier goes, "Yeah, how comes that is? If you win every game in the East, you should be the East champions. Come on."
I love the Spurrier impersonation too. One game, because you know what we're doing the game for the last segment of the hour. I do want to make up one, and this is going to take a lot of research, and I gotta get really, really good because Steve Spurrier coached in this market and is the best coach this program has ever seen, and you know the South Carolina football glory days are Steve Spurrier, so people paid a lot more attention to the Spurrier-isms that came out of his mouth. But I do want to make a competition, or not a competition, a game where it's like you have to decide whether this insult was on an SEC message board or a Steve Spurrier quote. That one's going to take a lot of research. And I got to really bust ass to be able to find a good like number to be able to pull from that will make you think, right? Because so many of these Spurrier quips and Spurrier-isms are so good that they live forever, right? I can't give away too many right now. I wanted to give some examples, but I do want to play this game in the future, so I'm going to hold back on that. But 51%, Eli Drinkwitz. Let's find it interesting. If I'm even as a transplant, right? Out of all these guys, I find probably Brian Kelly to be the most unlikable or the most hateable, and that's solely because of the way he's left programs. You know, like not communicating things with players, leaving a bad taste in his former players' mouths whenever he does leave, and kind of bailing on teams. Like, look, I respect coaches that will leave for jobs, but still coach the bowl game, especially if it's a big one. Like the Cincinnati one, right? Like they were undefeated, and they were in the Sugar Bowl. This is the biggest game in the history of the program, playing against Florida in the Sugar Bowl. You took the job to Notre Dame. No one will blame you for taking the job at Notre Dame. Not a soul blames you for taking that destination job. And he just bails on the bowl game. You can play after the bowl game. You can work on recruiting. He just bailed after the bowl game. Wasn't a huge fan of that. And, of course, the fake Southern accent at the LSU basketball game the day before his introductory press conference seemed so inauthentic and so stupid that it wasn't even funny. So I think I would go Brian Kelly. But speaking of the SEC, maybe not the hateable things in the SEC, but the most newsworthy things in the SEC. We're going to take a drive around the conference as the postgame show continues.
All right, several wrecks on the road still this afternoon. 26 westbound at 126. Got an accident there. So look out for that. Assembly Street. This is going to be Assembly and Whaley, so down near USC. We have a wreck too, Clemson Road near Sparkleberry at Chimney Ridge. Trenham Road at Decker Boulevard. Platte Springs Road, Manual Church. That one is by the airport. And then 378 Garners Ferry Road at I-77, an accident there as well. This is Captain Dave in the WIS TV Traffic Center.
Yeah, our last drive around the SEC this week, which means we get to look at some of the matchups that are going to be played so far this weekend. We have some results, early ones. I know on Wednesday we had the Egg Bowl baseball version. Mississippi State took care of Ole Miss 5-1. Both of those teams are going to be in action this weekend, but against different teams. Ole Miss is making the trek to Auburn, who has the worst record in the SEC with a terrible 3-18, but Ole Miss trying to get their resume good enough to squeak into the NCAA tournament. They're fringe. They're one of the fringe teams. It's been an uphill battle for them, but most of the projections have them fighting for a spot on the bubble, if you will, to steal a college basketball tournament. I think you can consider Ole Miss a good bubble team for the NCAA baseball tournament. Mississippi State, on the other hand, the winners of your Pearl Mississippi Egg Bowl game on Wednesday, will be playing against Alabama in Starkville. They're 30-15, 12-9 overall. I like Mississippi State's chances to be playing additional baseball when the regular season ends. There has been one game played so far today. Now, Tennessee and Florida, the series in Gainesville, was supposed to start last night, but weather was not very cooperative, and unfortunately, there's certain parts of the Southeast where we might have similar stories tonight or tomorrow. I know we might end up experiencing either a rain delay or maybe a rain out, because there is some rain in the forecast tomorrow in Columbia, Missouri. So maybe we might have that same situation in the Gamecock series against the Tigers. But Tennessee and Florida playing a doubleheader today. They got it started earlier this afternoon. They're in the bottom of the 8th right now. Florida fighting for their life. Tennessee leads 5-2. Again, that's in the bottom of the 8th. Tennessee came out swinging 2 runs in the top of the 2nd. Florida, however, did match that with 2 runs in the bottom of the 2nd, thanks to RBI from Ty Evans. And then in the 3rd, that tie game did not last very long. 3rd inning, Tennessee puts up 2 on the board and then is able to put up 1 in the top of the 8th. So Florida right now batting with 2 chances left to try to tie this thing up and take it to extras or win it. Florida could really use the win. Florida sitting at 23-21 right now. They're 9-12 in the conference. And look, I think it was D1 Baseballs that had them as a 3 seed. And I think Baseball Americas too. They're a 3 seed right now, or a 3 seed in a region. Let me put it that way. A 3 seed in the region. Let me clarify. Which means they are on the fringe of missing the NCAA baseball tournament. And when you have Jack Caglione on your team, who is a top 3-4 player, in terms of guys who can do both pitching and hitting, he might be the best player in the conference. That's pretty unacceptable. So Florida having a really disappointing season. They need a win against Tennessee at home in the worst way. They're trailing 5-2. Vanderbilt and Georgia series starts in Athens tonight. I think Bryce Cunningham's going to be on the mound for Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt could use an extra win after losing the series at home to Mississippi State last week. Georgia coming to Columbia, South Carolina a week from today for the weekend series next week. They're in a similar place to South Carolina. Great RPI, really good record, good collection of wins, but is just fighting to stay above 500 in the gauntlet known as the Southeastern Conference. They have a series against Vanderbilt at home, then travel here. It's not getting much easier for the Dogs. Now, the series of the weekend, that's going to start tonight. Hagen Smith going to be on the mound for Arkansas. Trey Poozer for Kentucky getting the start. Two top 10 teams in the country. Kentucky on like a mini skid for most teams, losing, on the road to a team like South Carolina and losing 2 of 3 at home to a team like Tennessee doesn't necessitate the skid tag. But when you started off like 15-1 in the SEC play, they're sliding a little bit. Not getting much easier as the number 2 team in the country in Arkansas comes to their place tonight with the best pitcher in college baseball taking the mound as well. Kentucky going to try their best to steal one. I don't know if they have it tonight despite them hosting it. And then later on tonight, maybe another hour or so after Tennessee and Florida ends their first game, they'll play their second. We also have South Carolina and Missouri tonight. It's just been released, the starting lineup. Now, it's nothing groundbreaking, nothing new, because they're going with the exact same lineup that has produced 38 runs in the last 23 innings in back-to-back run rule wins against Kentucky and East Tennessee State. Austin Brindling's playing in center field and is leading off. Ethan Petrie hitting second and is going to be playing at first. Parker Nolan hitting in the 3-hole at second base. Catcher Cole Messina is hitting cleanup. Blake Jackson will be in right field batting fifth, followed by Kennedy Jones at 6, who is in left field. Dalton Reeves gets DH duties tonight. He'll be batting 7th. Talmadge LeCroy playing in his new spot at shortstop, batting 8th. And 9th, Gavin Casas at 3rd. And then, of course, Roman Campbell will start the game for South Carolina. I expect him to go maybe 3 innings before Ty Good takes over for about 3 or 4 innings, and then maybe look for the rest of the bullpen to take it away through innings 7 through 9. Roman Campbell, for the last, this is the 3rd straight weekend series where he has been the Friday starter, but doesn't go very deep into these games because Ty Good can give you a long run in the middle of the game. So it's kind of been a Roman Campbell and Ty Good combo start for this Gamecock team on Friday. And then tonight at 8 o'clock, Texas A&M, the number 1 team in the country at 39-6 overall, 15-6 in conference play, travels to Baton Rouge against LSU, who 29-17 overall, but 7-14 in the SEC, and is coming off probably the most embarrassing conference loss or series loss that anyone's had this year, when Auburn had 2 of their 3 conference wins against them in Louisiana just last week. Quick run through the standings before we take a quick break and we quiz Dave on what is a real high school sporting event and what is not. We'll go ahead and look at the standings right now in the SEC East. Kentucky has a 1-game lead still over Tennessee. They're 16-5 in the conference. Tennessee is 15-6. If the result holds against Florida, Tennessee will be 16-6, and that lead goes from 1 full game to half a game. And then if Hagen Smith does what Hagen Smith does and shuts out Kentucky, there's a good chance that by the end of the night, Tennessee and Kentucky will have swapped places in the SEC East. Tied for 3rd in the division, Vanderbilt and South Carolina with records of 11-10. This is why it's a really good weekend for South Carolina to be on the road against Missouri, and Vanderbilt has to go on the road to play Georgia. 2 completely different opponents right there. But you got to fend off Missouri because because Georgia is nipping at the heels of the Gamecocks. Georgia 10-11 in the conference. Florida another game back behind them at 9-12, and then Mizzou in the cellar at 6-15. In the West, Arkansas still maintains a 1-game lead over Texas A&M. The Hogs are 16-5, and the Aggies are 15-6. 3 games behind the Aggies are Mississippi State, playing a lot better as of late, but not enough to catch the top 2 in the division. They're 12-9 overall. And then everybody else in the West under 500. Alabama sitting at 9-12. 2 games behind them are LSU, the defending national champions, at 7-14. Tied with them, Ole Miss at 7-14. And last, not just the cellar of the SEC West, but in the cellar of the entire conference, the Auburn Tigers. That is your drive around the SEC. And coming up next, the moment I at least have been personally waiting for. It's time for our Fugazi Friday segment. Captain Dave's going to answer the main question. Are these 5 games real or fake? We're going to find out as we wrap up the postgame show. Final segment here on the post-game show, and it's the moment I've been waiting for all show. I get to channel my inner Jigsaw and ask Captain David Dare, would you like to play a game?
Sure.
There we go. That's the spirit. So today on Fugazi Friday, to end the segment, there we go. To end the show, Dave, I want to give you 5 sporting events, high school sporting events that are happening across this great nation, and you're going to tell me if these are real games or not real games.
Okay.
And we're going to start in West Virginia. The Polka Dots versus the Capital Cougars tonight on the Diamond. Is that real, or did I make that up?
Polka Dots. Cougars is easy enough. Polka Dots. Wow. It's West Virginia. Doesn't seem like they would go for that. Polka Dots. You know, tough people. They're minors.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Mountain country over there. So are you feeling Fugazi here?
I'm saying there's no polka dots.
You would be incorrect.
Really?
In Polka, West Virginia, they are the Polka Dots. Yes, they are most known for their dominant show choir program, and they have, according to ESPN, the #1 sports nickname in the entire country.
Wow.
But it's not polka, but it's P-O-C-A, and then they're just the dots. Fun fact about the Polka Dots varsity baseball team in Polka, West Virginia, they are winless this year. Just like our friends at Maryland East Shore, they have yet to win a game, and they're fighting for win #1 tonight against the Capital Cougars. So, 0 for 1. Number 2, in Illinois, put this down. In Illinois, the Polo Marcos versus the South Beloit Sobos.
Polo Marcos. Wow.
The Polo Marcos versus the South Beloit Sobos.
Is this polo that they're playing, or?
This is baseball as well. Yeah, this is
Baseball
on the
as
Diamond. Now, it would be really funny if they were playing polo. I didn't even, I need to assume that as a game to play.
Yeah. You know, I once lived in an apartment complex right by the pool, and I thought this would be great. You know, I see girls all day. This would be wonderful. No, kids playing Marco Polo 24 hours a day. It was terrible.
Wasn't what you had in mind.
No. I'm going to say yes to that one.
And you got your first correct answer, David Dare. That is very true. In Illinois, it is in Polo, Illinois, obviously named after Marco Polo, and its most famous resident was actually George Clinton.
Wow.
No. Sorry. No, not that George Clinton. This George Clinton is George Perkins Clinton, and he was a notable American botanist, mycologist, and plant pathologist.
Oh, he's not Parliament Funkadelic guy.
No, not that George Clinton, no. But close. And by that, I mean they just share a first and last name. In Washington, the Camas Paper Shredders versus the Prairie Plainsmen.
Paper Shredders? Plainsmen in Washington. That sounds iffy. But I'm going to go ahead and say yes. I'm just going to gamble on this one.
Going to gamble on this one by saying yes. Unfortunately, David Ayer, this is Fugazi. It's fake. Now, the schools are real. Camas High School and Prairie High School are real. But the real name, they're the Camas Paper Makers. And they are the Prairie Falcons.
Well, logging, Washington, that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. Camas actually won the game yesterday. It was played yesterday 6-2, and this is actually the birthplace of former NASCAR driver Greg Biffle. So, Camas, Washington. In Montana, the Hellgate Hellhounds versus the Billings West Golden Bears.
I'm going to say yes to that one. Yeah.
Say that one's true.
Yeah.
This one, Dave, is not true. I made this one up. It's close. It's actually the Hellgate Knights in Missoula, Montana, but they're most known for being the alma mater of former NFL quarterback Tim Rosenbach, former Washington State quarterback as well, and New Orleans Saints quarterback. He's now the co-offensive coordinator and wide receiver coach at Cal Poly, but they're not the Hellgate Hellhounds, but the Hellgate Knights, which is a whole lot more lame. Hellgate Hellhounds would be awesome.
That would be perfect.
That would rule. That would kick a whole lot of tail. And then lastly, so where are we at right now? You are
1 and 3.
Yeah. 1 correct, 3 incorrect. But you're not over.
That's true.
It's really all that matters. And that was really whenever we had to start throwing out, like, are we going to have potential punishments for a possible 0 for scenario here? But this is your chance to end on a strong note. here, David Adair. The last one, this is in the state of Florida, where totally normal things happen all the time.
Right.
The Tarpon Springs Spongers versus the Boca Ciega Pirates.
Pirates makes sense. Spongers in Florida. I mean, there's sponges in the ocean. Tarpon Springs.
SpongeBob was in the ocean.
Yes.
He's a sponge.
Yes. I'm going to say yes.
David Dare, your final response on Fugazi Friday is correct. You're going out on a make. So 2 of 5, 40% here. Not bad. Jay, his first time playing with the NBA game was 2 of 6. So well done. Now, they are the Tarpon Springs Spongers. They are named the Spongers after the town's, apparently, their lucrative history of sponge diving. So apparently that is a big, I guess, source of the economy there in Tarpon Springs. So the Tarpon Springs Spongers, and they do have a very goofy-looking mascot. It's almost like SpongeBob, but SpongeBob was more round. But it's real.
Could I give a shout-out to Brody and Cole Mitchell, my cousins in high school in Alabama, who took 3rd place in the national bass fishing competition.
Oh, very nice.
Oh, yeah.
Very nice. Good skill. Good skill. Are you much of a bass fisherman yourself? Is that something that happens in the family?
I was pretty good when I was younger, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I wasn't in competition, but yeah.
See, where my dad lives, lives next to my grandfather, who's got a pond and a cattle farm. We used to go bass fishing a lot. I'm not that good. I would never finish 3rd place at any type of competition, but I have fun, and that's all that matters.
I used to fish on the 9th hole of the country club. That was not supposed to.
I was going to say, is that legal?
I caught a lot of fish there.
Doesn't sound legal. But what is legal is that we're going to be back here on Monday, 3 o'clock. Jay Phillips will be back as well. We're going to react to South Carolina, Missouri baseball series and a whole lot more in the world of sports. Thanks for hanging out with me. We'll see you then.
All right, accident on Garners Ferry Road at I-77. Clemson Road near Sparkleberry. It's going to be at Chimney Ridge with a wreck there. Got another bang up on 26. This is going to be inbound, though. It's St. Andrews Road right before Malfunction Junction at the 106 mile marker. Then Hardscrabble Road near Lee Road. This is going to be at Magnolia Bay Court. A wreck there as well this afternoon. Have a good weekend. This is Captain Dave, WIS-TV Traffic Center.